Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Focus on Louisiana, Part 2. I'm Emily Maung-Douglass with Louisiana Sea Grant, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's event. This is the second part in a two-part series focused on Louisiana and oil spills. This one is specifically focusing on the intersection between oil spills and culture. Before we get into today's event, I just wanted to share a little bit about the programs that are making today's webinar possible. So for those of you who aren't already familiar with the Sea Grant Oil Spill Science Outreach Team, our program started back in 2014, and we're actually a partnership between the Gulf of Mexico Research Initiative, or GoMRI, and the Gulf of Mexico Sea Grant programs. GoMRI, as you might already be familiar, was a $500 million investment by BP from non-penalty funds. So it's completely separate from the Restore Act. And the purpose of GoMRI is really to try to better understand the fate of oil and dispersants in the environment. So understanding where they physically go and are transported, how they break down chemically, biologically, in marine systems, as well as what kinds of technologies can be used to better study them, as well as impacts of oil and dispersants on things like habitats and wildlife and people. GoMRI funded both science and outreach. They're managed by the Gulf of Mexico Alliance, or GOMA, and guided by a 20-member independent research board. During their 10-year run funding science and outreach efforts, they also partnered with Sea Grant to do some of that outreach to try to get oil spill science out into the hands of folks who could use it. So Sea Grant, if you're not already familiar with us, we are not just one, but actually a collection of 34 university-based programs located all over the coastal United States. So the thing that I usually tell people is that wherever there's a major body of water in the US, Sea Grant is there, whether it's a big blue ocean, a Great Lake, a Gulf of Mexico, there's a Sea Grant program. Our mission is to promote and enhance the practical and responsible use of coastal and marine resources, and we're non-advocacy. So that means that while we can't push specific viewpoints, we do try to provide the best available science and information on any given topic. We receive our funding through the federal government, through NOAA, and also the individual states that we're located in. And we have more than a 50-year history serving both the Gulf of Mexico and coastal communities nationwide. So back when Sea Grant partnered with GoMRI back in 2014, the 4 Sea Grant programs in the Gulf of Mexico all hired oil spill specialists, myself included. So you can see us listed on this map here. We're located all the way from Texas to Florida. And we also have a regional program manager and a communications coordinator. Our areas of expertise range broadly, and we all work in different focus areas that complement the GoMRI theme areas of study. So that means things like fishery science and ecotoxicology and chemistry and human dimensions and physical oceanography. So trying to work together to try to help synthesize and translate all of that oil spill science that's been done in the years since Deepwater Horizon. And I'll get a little bit more into that later, but I just wanted to take a quick moment to give a shout out to every single one of these people here on this slide. All of them are tuned in today to provide technical assistance on this webinar. So I just want to give my sincere thanks, not just for the help with today's webinar, but for all of the help with all of the webinars and seminars for the past 6.5 years that we've been running this program. Today is our final webinar or seminar for this program as we shift our efforts to try to synthesize the past 10 years of GoMRI research. So I just wanted to say sincere thanks to everyone on our team and everyone who's been on our team in the past. So Our oil spill science outreach program works with a variety of different target audiences listed here. And you might notice that they kind of shake out into one of two different categories. Either those who could use information for technical on-the-job decision-making, or those who just depend on a clean and healthy Gulf of Mexico for their livelihoods and their way of life. We have a three-step process that's pretty cyclical. We work with our target audiences to try to understand what kinds of information would help them do their jobs better, would help them sleep better at night. And we take those questions and we scour the literature, both peer-reviewed journals and government white papers, all vetted science, because that was something that was really lacking during Deepwater Horizon, was vetted information. So we only work with peer-reviewed published information. And we take all that scientific jargon and translate it into digestible language so that this information is accessible to everyone in our target audiences. Then we take that information and we share it, and it really, again, falls out into one of those four categories listed on the far right-hand side. And we package it up in a variety of different ways that are appropriate for our different types of audiences. And we take it back to our target audiences and go back to them again and try to understand if this meets their needs or not. So a lot of two-way communication going on. So I would like for you all to check out our webpage. You'll see that we have a variety of different products that are available. They're all free and open to the public. You can download one of our, I don't know, more than 30 plus bulletins or fact sheets that we have on a variety of oil spill science topics, ranging from things like how is seafood, the safety of seafood ensured after an oil spill, or what are the mental health impacts of an oil spill, or the impacts to sea turtles, or different types of habitats. All of that information is in those fact sheets and bulletins. We also have had many workshops and seminars over the years. You can click on those links and watch individual presentations from every single guest speaker we've ever had, all available on our webpage. So a great resource for learning. We also have a series of 3 animated short videos. They're no more than 5 minutes in length, and they're a great resource for educational use as well as for adults too. So I hope that you check out some of these resources, and things like our collaboration with NAS. The results of those community workshops are there as well, and also some science communication tips. So be sure to check those out. They're all available on our webpage, gulfseagrant.org/oil spill outreach. So as I mentioned earlier, today's webinar is actually the second part of a 2-part series. The first part, Focus on Louisiana, featured a variety of guest speakers that either talked about impacts to wildlife and habitats, or strictly focused on human dimensions, so things like behavioral and mental health and community-based needs. In terms of the environmental impacts, we were talking about things like impacts to habitat, vegetation, and also fish assemblages. So for part 2 of this webinar, we really wanted to focus on strictly the human aspect, the human dimension side. So, but you will notice that with all of our guest speakers, there is that strong undercurrent of impacts to the habitat and to wildlife. And again, that sort of intersection between the environment and people, which we saw in that first part of our webinar series. So we'll be hearing from folks like Ed Landgraf, who will be talking about oil spill prevention and safety, pipeline safety, and Chip McGimsey, who will be sharing about how we can better take into account cultural resources during an oil spill. We're also going to be hearing from a member of one of our coastal communities here in Louisiana, and the impacts that oil spills have had on her tribe. as well as some efforts that the state has undertaken to try to preserve some of that Louisiana cultural knowledge. So we'll be hearing from a variety of guest speakers about a variety of topics, all again dealing with oil spills and people, but again with that undercurrent of impacts to the environment. As we were preparing for this webinar, I got together with the guest speakers ahead of time, and we were throwing around ideas about exactly what we wanted for the audience, you all, to know about. And something that occurred to us is that if you're not from Louisiana, you may not be familiar with Louisiana's problem with land loss. While land loss is an issue that exists throughout much of the coastal United States and worldwide, it's particularly bad here in Louisiana. If we focus in on the map that you see on the right-hand side, that red box there, southeastern Louisiana, coastal Louisiana in that area has actually had a loss of more than 34 square miles annually since 1932. So for me, coming from the mid-Atlantic region, coming down here, I didn't really have a good sense of what that really meant. It sounded like a big number. So if you do some analogies, some conversions, that equates to the loss of about 2 football fields worth of land per hour each day. So quite a bit of land. Also, if we look at it in terms of historical losses, from 1932 to about 2000, you can see about 1,900 square miles of land has been lost, and that's roughly the size of the state of Delaware. The projected loss over time, so up to 2050, it's projected that there'll be an additional 700 square miles lost, which is equivalent to about the size of the greater DC to Baltimore area. So all of that information is available from USGS on their site, but that information might be surprising for you if you're not from Louisiana. So as you can imagine, you don't want to do anything to exacerbate that land loss to a state that's already losing land at such a high rate. So you might be wondering, well, what does this have to do with oil spills? So something that our guest speakers felt might be relevant for you all, the audience, to know is that there is a correlation between land loss and oil spills. So, oh, one thing I forgot, just in case you're wondering what that looks like. This is a zoomed in area of that map of southeastern Louisiana, and everything shown in red is either land that has been lost since 1932 or is projected to be lost by the year 2050. So you can see it's a pretty dramatic loss of land. I'm not quite sure what's happened to my PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. So that intersection with oil spills, as I was mentioning. So oil spills have the potential to increase land loss by killing the roots of plants that populate the marshes. So an example of this from the peer-reviewed published literature, actually funded by GoMRI through the CWC, the Coastal Waters Consortium, actually observed this happening in Barataria Bay, Louisiana, in the wetlands. So if you look on the left-hand side, this is the same marsh on the left and the right, taken before and after the oil spill, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. You see on the left that there's a nice, clean, smooth line of the marsh along the marsh's edge. And then just a year later, then you can actually see gouges taken out of the land from where the plant's roots have actually been destroyed, and that when the plants die off, then that's allowing the sediments to be washed away. So that's a strong tie-in between oil spills and land loss that seems relevant for the discussion that we're going to have today, because in Louisiana, it's very difficult to have a conversation about culture without talking about land loss, and that's going to feed into what some of our guest speakers will share with you all.